It arrived in an envelope without a return address. Thick cream paper, hand-folded, sealed in deep burgundy wax with no symbol, no initials. Just an address in Mayfair, London, and a date, April 7th, 8 p.m. Alex stared at it for minutes before opening it, flipping it over, holding it up to the light like some sort of riddle. There was no sender, no context, only 4 words inside. You are invited, survive. He should have thrown it out. But Alex had long learned to trust the oddities life threw his way. 35, successful, comfortably wealthy, but restlessly alert. Born in Sofia, made in Prague, sharpened in Berlin, and now split between Zurich and London. Alex had seen too much to dismiss mystery. Sometimes the strange doors led to the real rooms. He arrived at the address 10 minutes early. It was a narrow Georgian townhouse tucked between 2 embassies on a quiet Mayfair street. No nameplate, no lights in the windows, only a uniformed doorman in black, not speaking, just watching. Alex gave a polite nod. The man didn't move. Instead, he opened the door silently and gestured him inside. The air inside was different, still, cold, fragrant with aged leather and something like cigar smoke that had long settled into the wood. A single chandelier hung high above a marble floor that bore no scuff marks, no footsteps, like no one ever really walked here. A hallway stretched ahead, its walls lined with dark portraits. Eyes in every frame followed his steps. There was no receptionist, no introduction, just a man in a gray 3-piece suit standing at the end of the hall. Not tall, but unmistakably confident, with snow-white hair slicked back and eyes the color of wet ash. His name, Alex would soon learn, was Lawrence. Alex, the man said, his accent precise but unplaceable. Right on time. Good. Alex hesitated. You are? Lawrence. I host the evenings here. Let's not waste time with titles. The others are waiting. The others? Lawrence turned and began walking, expecting to be followed. No explanations, no small talk. Alex followed him through a velvet-draped corridor and down a short set of stairs. There, a set of mahogany double doors stood open, revealing a room unlike anything he'd imagined. It was circular, lined with bookcases from floor to ceiling. A fire crackled in a hearth that looked older than the house itself. 7 leather chairs were arranged in a wide circle, each one identical, each one already filled, except for one. 7 people, all impeccably dressed, all watching him, not with hostility, not even curiosity, just stillness. Lawrence gestured toward the empty chair. We begin shortly. Alex stepped into the circle, feeling the texture of the room shift around him, as though the air thickened once he entered. No names were exchanged, no handshakes, just nods. One woman sipped something dark from a crystal glass. An older man in a navy suit glanced at his watch. Someone exhaled quietly, bored, as if this was just another Thursday. Alex sat, still no one spoke. Even the fire seemed too polite to crackle too loudly. Finally, Lawrence stepped into the center of the circle. You have all survived, he said. His voice was soft but carried weight, as though the room itself leaned in to hear him. That's why you're here. He turned slowly, looking at each face. Wealth is no accident. Survival is no accident, and neither is this room. Lawrence clasped his hands behind his back. The Survivors Club is not a place of judgment, but of truth. Once a month, each of you tells your story, a real one, the one you've never told, no embellishment, no excuses. No names are repeated outside these walls. This is not therapy. This is not confession. This is history. He looked directly at Alex. Tonight you listen. Next time you speak. Alex met his gaze. There was no threat in Lawrence's tone, but the implication was unmistakable. You speak or you don't return. Lawrence gestured to the woman with the crystal glass. She rose gracefully, late 40s, elegant. Her heels barely made a sound on the rug as she stepped into the center. She smiled faintly, her lipstick the color of dried roses. My name, she said, is not important. She looked at each person, pausing. But the first person I ever killed was my brother. The fire had settled into a soft, constant hum, throwing long shadows across the shelves. The room smelled of cedar smoke, old paper, and something else, almost metallic, like blood left too long on polished wood. The woman in the center of the circle did not flinch. Her eyes, blue and motionless, surveyed them all like a quiet monarch measuring her court. "I was 27 when he died," she said. "My older brother, Richard, my father's favorite, the heir." She took a sip from her glass, her fingers steady. "Our family name is printed on nearly every cigarette sold between Hong Kong and Cairo. We never smoked them, of course. We just counted the margins." No one interrupted. No one asked for clarification. Alex looked around the circle. Not a single eye blinked. Richard was, how do I say it? She tilted her head slightly. Efficient, liked rules. Father adored him. He was being groomed to take over. And me? I was the placeholder. The polished girl they could marry off to another empire. Her voice never wavered. When I found out Father had given Richard the majority share of the trust, I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I asked for time. 6 months to prepare, to finish my position in Zurich, to grow up a little more. Father said that was sensible. Richard, of course, agreed. Always reasonable. Alex felt his breath catch. The way she spoke, methodical, serene, struck something deep inside him. She paused. 2 months later, Richard drowned during a diving trip near Cebu. They said it was a sudden current, that he panicked. But the thing about panic, she said, is that it leaves a pattern, and I made sure there were none. She set the glass down carefully on a small side table. I didn't push him, I just waited. I waited until he was far enough below, when he'd passed the safe margin, when the air was low and the blood in his ears was too loud to think. And then I took his secondary regulator and swam away. Silence. I didn't watch him die. That was never the point. The point, she said, straightening her back, was that I could. She returned to her chair. No applause, no condemnation. Only the quiet hiss of the fire. Alex stared at the floor, his jaw tight. This wasn't a performance. This was ritual. And everyone here had done something. Something irreversible. Lawrence stepped forward again. In this room, he said, we do not pretend. He looked directly at Alex. Every member shares their survival story. One story, each night. That is the only rule. He began walking slowly around the circle. You do not lie, you do not embellish, and you do not remain silent. He stopped behind Alex. If you choose not to speak when your time comes, you are removed. There was something final in the word removed. Not fired, not expelled, removed, as if taken out of reality itself. Alex looked at the others. A man with slick back hair and a twitching right hand. An older woman with deep lines and a 1,000-yard stare. A dark-skinned man in an impeccable Italian suit, not blinking. A short, round man who smiled too much. And finally, the woman who had just finished her story, now completely still, her expression empty. 6 of them, 6 survivors, and now him. Alex wasn't sure if he'd just joined a club or been cornered in a hunt. Lawrence spoke one last time before stepping back into the shadows. There is no redemption here, he said. Only truth. The fire cracked, sending a single spark into the dark. The woman leaned back in her chair, her fingers lightly touching the rim of her glass. The fire gave her face a soft orange glow, like a portrait painted in a different century. There was no remorse in her expression, only elegance, measured and precise. My brother's name was Richard. Richard Alexander Fairchild, she began, as if reciting a passage from a biography she had long since memorized. Firstborn, rowing champion, Princeton naturally, always the center of every room he walked into. Father loved him for it. She looked up, making eye contact with no one in particular. When we were children, Richard once locked me in the wine cellar because I refused to give him my piece of cake. I was 7. He left me there overnight. The next morning, my mother told me I was too dramatic. She smiled faintly, as though recalling a mildly amusing anecdote. After that, I stopped crying when he hurt me. It made things easier. Father always said we had to protect the family's image, especially Richard's. I was expected to behave. He was expected to shine. Alex watched her, trying to decide if she was dramatizing for effect or if this was simply how she told the truth, like a story she had rehearsed 1,000 times. We inherited the company when Father died. Fairchild International, one of the top 5 tobacco exporters in the world. My brother took 80%. I received 20. A gesture, he called it. Said I had other talents. Her voice dropped slightly, almost conspiratorial. He was right, of course. She took another sip of her drink. The liquid was nearly gone now, but her poise never wavered. Richard had a thing for risk. He dove, climbed, raced. He wasn't reckless, just confident. So very confident. Her lips curved into something that might have been a smile. I invited him on a diving trip. Private boat, 2 crew, crystal water, blue sky. He was thrilled. I hadn't gone diving in years, but he was always eager to show off. She paused for a beat, letting the silence do its work. When we reached the reef, I insisted we go without the crew. Like old times, I said. He agreed immediately. He always loved nostalgia when it came from someone he underestimated. She leaned forward slightly, her tone dropping, soft and exact. We went down together, everything normal. Then halfway through the dive, I gave the signal. Low air. I motioned to him for the secondary regulator. Standard practice. Alex felt the air in the room tighten, like a wire being pulled across the circle. And when he gave it to me, she continued, I took it, then I kicked away. She let the words hang. I knew how far we were. I knew how long he had. I knew the currents, the pressure, the panic. She paused. But more importantly, I knew Richard. She folded her hands neatly in her lap. He was found the next morning, drowned. No signs of trauma, no evidence of foul play. The doctors said he had suffered a panic attack and miscalculated his depth. A tragic accident, they called it. The others around the circle listened with the calm of people who had heard worse. Only Alex shifted uncomfortably. You see, she said, the thing about power is, once you've tasted it, you can't tolerate injustice. Not even a familial one. Not even one printed in your blood. She looked directly at Alex now, her voice almost gentle. You learn to do what's necessary, and you learn to live with it. Silence returned, real silence. Not heavy, not mourning, just stillness. One by one, the others gave her slight nods. Not approval, not congratulations, just recognition, as if to say, yes, that's how it's done. Alex could barely breathe. He wasn't sure what stunned him more, the story or how little it shocked the others. He looked at Lawrence, standing once again at the edge of the firelight. There was no expression on his face. Alex swallowed hard. Was this real? Was this theater? Or was this some kind of confession trap, one he had already stepped too far into to escape? The streets outside were washed in amber as Alex stepped into the cold. London at night had a particular stillness, heavy, expensive, and watching. He pulled his coat tighter around him, though he barely felt the wind. His mind was too loud. The silence of the club clung to him like the scent of the fireplace, thick and lingering. The story, that story, played on repeat in his head. The way she said it, the way no one flinched, the way no one even asked her why. He walked past the hotel concierge without a word, straight into the elevator, then into his room. 14 floors above the city, but it still felt like the walls were pressing in. He sat on the edge of the bed and stared at the floor. What was this place? He had accepted the invitation out of curiosity, maybe vanity. He had assumed it was some exclusive networking circle, a rich man's fraternity with overpriced whiskey and manufactured mystery. He'd thought he was being recruited, but now it felt more like he'd been summoned. He loosened his tie. His reflection in the mirror looked pale, older than usual. The years had settled in his face all at once. Cheekbones a little sharper, eyes a little hollower. He poured himself a drink but didn't touch it. Instead, his thoughts wandered, back to where it had really started. Not in London, not in Prague, not even in Berlin. No, it had started in a basement apartment in Sofia, a decade ago, with a dying laptop and someone else's dream. The idea hadn't been his. That was the part he never said out loud. It had belonged to Stefan. Stefan, with the buzz cut and the nervous energy, the one who believed in building things instead of selling them. Stefan had written the first line of code for the engine that would later become Syntech Systems, the platform that changed their lives, changed his life. Back then, they had been equals, friends even, until the offers came in, until the money started whispering its sharp promises. Alex had always had the better suits, the smoother tongue, the instinct to turn genius into capital. Investors trusted him. Journalists wanted to quote him. Stefan didn't want the spotlight, but Stefan wanted credit. And when he started threatening to pull the plug, to take his code and leave, Alex did what survivors do. He pushed first. Not physically, not directly. That would have been too messy. But he made a call, whispered the right concerns to the right lawyer, filed the patents under a different name, shifted the shares. And when Stefan realized what had happened, when he confronted him, screaming in the office lobby, Alex watched security escort him out without blinking. A week later, Stefan vanished. No farewell, no messages, no lawyers. Just gone. The papers called it a breakdown. One blog speculated suicide, but there was never a body. Just a hole where a person had been, and a fortune that remained untouched until Alex claimed it fully. He hadn't spoken Stefan's name in 6 years, not even to himself. Alex stood and walked to the window. Below, the city moved like a dark sea, glittering in fragments. He wondered what these people in the club would do if they knew the truth, if they already did. Because tonight had taught him something terrifying. This wasn't just about telling the story, it was about owning it. He looked at the card again, still resting on the nightstand where he'd left it. The Survivors Club. He could walk away, call his flight, vanish into his network of lawyers, aliases, and offshore shadows. No one forced him to stay. But deep down, Alex knew something had already shifted. Part of him wanted to return, not out of guilt, not out of curiosity, out of need. He turned from the window, and in the mirror's reflection, for a split second, he thought he saw a figure behind him in the room. Tall, unmoving. He turned quickly. Nothing. Just silence. But the next night, he returned to the club. No questions, no explanation. He took his seat in the circle. The fire was already burning, and this time he didn't look away. The fire burned lower tonight, slower, as if the flames themselves had grown cautious. Alex arrived just before 8, nodded once to Lawrence at the door, and stepped back into the circle. The same 6 faces awaited him, the same exact chairs. No names, no greetings, just presence. There was a rhythm to it now, this ritual of quiet, of waiting. Lawrence stood near the hearth, eyes scanning the room with surgical calm. Tonight's storyteller rose without introduction. The man had the soft tan of alpine wealth and the confidence of someone used to seeing numbers bend to his will. His suit was custom but subtle, his shoes silent, his accent Swiss, clipped, deliberate. "My name is irrelevant," he began, voice smooth as polished marble. "But my bank was in Geneva." He didn't smile. He didn't need to. "For nearly 20 years, I worked exclusively with private clients, quiet clients, families with dynasties, art collectors, royals in exile, criminals in denial, people who needed discretion more than dividends." He took his time, pacing slowly within the circle. But around 2003, something changed. The rules began to squeeze us. Transparency, compliance, governments pretending to care where the money came from or where it went. I adapted, of course. We all did. We always do. He paused near the fire, watching the flames reflect in his watch. But adaptation is expensive, and predictable clients, they're already priced in. What I needed was velocity. Alex leaned forward slightly. There was something hypnotic about the man's cadence. Clean, rehearsed. That's when I realized something. The dying are surprisingly easy to convince. He let the sentence hang. People with terminal diagnoses, particularly the very wealthy, become pliable, desperate for meaning, legacy, redemption, all the soft illusions we sell ourselves near the end. He clasped his hands behind his back. I offered them vision, a last opportunity to do good, custom philanthropic vehicles, special foundations, tax-efficient legacy funds. Of course, they were all structured through my channels, managed exclusively by me. He looked around the circle, making brief eye contact with each person. They were told the funds would go to ecological reform, to education, to global health. In reality, of course, they went into leveraged funds, shell corporations, and long-term assets with no intention of ever exiting. Alex felt something sharp turn in his gut. In the end, most of them died believing they had saved the world, the banker said. Their children never saw a cent, but I saw billions, quietly, elegantly, without a single forged document. Someone in the circle chuckled once, softly. The banker returned to his chair without another word. No embellishment, no justification, just truth, dressed in silk. Alex stared at the floor. It wasn't just the story, it was how normal it had felt in that room. No one gasped, no one flinched. The woman who had drowned her brother reached for another drink. Lawrence remained motionless. This was no theater of repentance. This was strategy. Here, confession wasn't a weakness. It was currency, proof that you belonged, that you had done what needed to be done when the world turned its face away. Alex swallowed hard. A strange chill passed through him, but the fire was still burning. He shifted in his chair, suddenly uneasy. His phone vibrated silently in his jacket pocket. Odd. He had turned off notifications hours ago. He slipped it out discreetly. No number, just a text. Stefan would have never lasted in this room. Alex stared at the screen. His breath caught. No name, no trace. He didn't move for several seconds, pulse thudding in his throat. Then he looked up, scanning the circle. No one was watching him. No one, except Lawrence. The host's eyes were on him now, not judging, just knowing. And for the first time, Alex realized he wasn't just being invited to speak. He was being watched. Back in his hotel room, the air felt wrong. Thicker, still. Alex closed the door behind him and stood for a moment in silence. No footsteps overhead, no traffic below. Just the faint hum of the minibar and the slow beat of his own pulse. He dropped his coat on the chair, loosened his tie, and noticed it immediately. A white envelope placed neatly on the pillow. He hadn't seen it when he left. No hotel branding, no postage mark, just his name. Alex Dimitrov, written in neat block letters, as if someone had printed it without emotion. He opened it carefully, not breathing. Inside was a single photograph. The image was sharp, too sharp, a high-resolution candid, taken in natural light. It showed two men sitting at a cafe table outside in some European city. Amsterdam, maybe. One of the men was unmistakably Alex. The other was Stefan. Not an old photo. This wasn't something from university or from their early startup days. Alex was wearing his current coat, his current haircut. It could have been taken a week ago, but Stefan was supposed to be dead. 5 years ago, after the breakdown, after the betrayal, Stefan had vanished. No goodbye, no social media, no sightings. One tabloid had suggested suicide. Another claimed he had moved to Argentina, but no one ever found him. Alex had chosen to believe in absence. It was easier that way. Clean. His hands shook slightly as he flipped the photo over. Nothing. Just blank. He dropped into the chair, the weight of the image still in his hand. His heart pounded in short, painful thumps. Who had taken this? Who had placed it in his room? And why now? He looked at the window instinctively. The curtains were still drawn shut. The door had been locked. But someone had been here. Someone who knew his past. Someone who wanted him to see this. A memory clawed at him. Stefan's voice, hoarse and furious, that last night in the office. One day this will all come back. You think it won't, but it always does. Alex stood and moved to the minibar. He poured a drink with shaky fingers and drank it too fast. Had the club known? Was this the reason for the invitation? Not a coincidence. Not a mystery. A message. He looked at the card still sitting on the desk. The Survivors Club. Its logo embossed in blind print. No letters, just a circle. a single break in its line at the bottom. A design you'd only notice if you looked closely. He hadn't noticed before. Now it felt like a noose. He thought back to Lawrence's eyes, the way they had locked on him after the banker's story, the way the text had arrived on his phone just seconds later. Stefan would have never lasted in this room. It wasn't just eerie, it was intimate, targeted. They knew. Not just about Stefan, about what had happened, about why Stefan had disappeared. Alex sat down slowly, his breath shallow. He had thought he could sit through the stories, nod politely, and leave. That he could listen without speaking, observe without participating. But the walls were closing in now. The club was no longer a circle, it was a trap. Each night, another confession, another soul unburdened, and his turn loomed closer with every passing word. Except now, it wasn't just a matter of when. It was a matter of how much they already knew. He looked again at the photograph. Stefan, staring into the distance, unaware of the camera. Or maybe not unaware at all. Maybe this was deliberate. Maybe Stefan had sent it. Or maybe Stefan had never died. Alex felt the weight of the room shift again, like someone watching just beyond the edges of the light. And suddenly, for the first time since he had arrived in London, he wished, truly wished, he had never opened that invitation. The next gathering felt colder. It wasn't the fire. It still burned steadily, casting soft halos across the wood-paneled walls. It wasn't the people, those same 6 faces, unchanging in their calm detachment. It was the silence, thicker, tighter, like the space between breaths before a scream. Lawrence stood near the hearth as always, but tonight he didn't open the evening with pleasantries or rituals. He simply said, "There are 2 left." His eyes moved from chair to chair until they settled on Raymond. Raymond was the oldest among them, late 60s, maybe early 70s, American, sharp suit, pursed lips that looked carved from old marble. He had a stillness that suggested power acquired long ago and never questioned since. Raymond gave a slow nod, like a monarch tolerating protocol. Then he stood. His story came like a scalpel, dry, brutal, surgical. The assassination of a competitor, a political cover-up, offshores, mercenaries, a private firm that didn't officially exist. He didn't flinch. He didn't justify. He owned it. When he finished, no one applauded. Just another silence. Just another seat reclaimed. Now only Alex remained. The sole unspeaking voice. The air around him felt thinner. Lawrence's gaze returned. "You understand the rules," he said softly. "One story, one truth, one opportunity." Alex nodded slowly, but his mind was screaming. He had no doubt what was coming. Later, when the fire had dimmed and the room began to disperse in unspoken agreement, Alex lingered. The weight in his chest didn't let him move. Raymond, on his way out, stopped beside him. "They told you what happened to William?" he asked. Alex looked up. "Who?" "William Vaughn. He sat in your chair 3 years ago. Said he needed more time. Said he wasn't ready." Raymond's eyes were unreadable. "He left the club. We never saw him again." "Disappeared?" "No," Raymond said quietly. "Was disappeared." Alex's stomach twisted. He walked out alone that night, his coat tight around him like a shell. The sky was low with fog. He didn't go back to the hotel. He walked. For hours. He ended up in an alley cafe near Marble Arch, hunched over a coffee that had long gone cold. He couldn't think straight. Every cell in his body pulsed with memory. Stefan's face. That night in the office. The confrontation. The shouting. Alex closing the door, then making the call. Not to security, not to Stefan, to the lawyers. The code had been theirs, the algorithms, the patents, the platform, but Stefan had built the spine. And when he threatened to pull it all, Alex had taken the fastest route to silence. He'd activated clauses Stefan hadn't known existed, frozen his access, filed for sole ownership, claimed Stefan had been mentally unstable. It had worked. Within 72 hours, Stefan's accounts were locked, his shares diluted, his name removed. Publicly, it looked like an internal dispute. Privately, Stefan vanished into the cracks. Alex never looked back, but now he couldn't look away. The photo, the text, the circle. He made his way back to the club the next night, earlier than usual. The door opened before he knocked. Lawrence stood there. He didn't smile. "You have one night left," he said calmly. "I don't know what you think you know," Alex replied, the words sharp and shaking. Lawrence stepped aside, letting him in. "We don't think, we listen." Alex hesitated in the threshold. "And if I don't speak?" Lawrence's tone didn't change. "Then we'll speak for you." The words hit harder than a threat. They were a promise. Alex walked into the dark, where the fire was already waiting, and the circle, silent and patient, was ready to hear what he had buried. The room was full before the hour. No one spoke. The fire crackled gently, casting long shadows across the velvet walls. The circle was complete, 6 faces still and waiting. Lawrence stood in his usual place, hands behind his back, eyes unmoving. Only one chair remained empty. Alex stood beside it. He hadn't slept. He hadn't eaten. His suit hung a little looser, his posture a little stiffer. But his eyes were sharp now, not with confidence, with inevitability. Lawrence gave him the briefest of nods, and Alex stepped forward into the center of the room. Silence wrapped around him. He looked at each of them. Raymond, the banker, the woman with the ice blue stare, the smiling man, the one with the scars on his knuckles, and the new face he hadn't seen before. All watching, all waiting. "My name is Alex Dimitrov," he began. His voice was steady but low. The words didn't fight their way out. They crawled. "I built a company in 2009, Syntex Systems. Some of you may have heard of it. Artificial intelligence diagnostics. It's now used by several defense agencies in over 70 hospitals worldwide." No reaction. "I was praised for it. Forbes, Wired. The visionary from the East, they called me." He swallowed. "But I wasn't the visionary." He took a breath. "The original idea, the core engine, the code that made it possible, it wasn't mine. It was created by someone else, a man named Stefan Ilyev. He was my partner, my friend. We started Syntech together." Still, no one moved. "We worked out of a basement apartment in Sofia. He wrote the algorithms. I found the money. It worked, until it didn't." Alex's voice cracked, just for a second, but he forced it down. "We had an argument. He wanted to pull the plug, said we were moving too fast, that the wrong people were circling. I disagreed." Another pause. "I filed emergency claims, rewrote the ownership structure, froze his access. I had the lawyers, the leverage, the public image. Within a week, he was erased from the company's records, and then..." He hesitated. His mouth opened, then closed. And then he disappeared. There it was, the edge of the truth, so close, but not quite over it. Alex felt the room closing in. "I never saw him again. Some said he ran. Some said he killed himself. I chose not to ask." He stepped back, breathing heavily now, looking at Lawrence. "That's the story." Lawrence didn't move. He only spoke one word. "Almost." The lights dimmed. A hidden panel opened in the far wall, seamless, silent. A large screen lowered into view. Static hummed, then cleared. And there he was, Stefan, alive, sitting at a plain desk, a soft desk lamp behind him. He looked older, leaner, hair longer and flecked with gray, but unmistakably him. Alex froze. Stefan looked into the camera and smiled, but there was no joy in it. "Hello, Alex." His voice was calm, cold. "I never died. I left, because I had to, because staying meant giving you what was mine and watching you destroy what we built." He turned slightly, speaking now to someone off camera, or perhaps to the whole room. "To those listening, yes, I gave the club this footage. I knew Alex would be here eventually. People like him always find their way in." He faced the lens again. "I wanted to hear what you'd say, Alex. What story you'd tell when you had no way out, when you finally had to confess." He leaned forward, and I heard it, almost all of it, but not quite. The screen went dark. Silence. Complete. Alex stood in the middle of the circle, breathless. All eyes were on him. but not with judgment, with revelation. They had all confessed, truly, fully, and he had tried to hold something back. Lawrence stepped forward slowly, his footsteps soft on the carpet. "No one asked you to be perfect," he said, "only to be honest." Alex couldn't speak. For the first time, he wasn't sure if there was anything left to say. The screen went dark. The room remained still for several moments, as if stunned by the echo of Stefan's final words. Alex stood frozen in the center of the circle. He wasn't breathing, or if he was, it was shallow, automatic, like a body trying to survive without permission. No one moved. Then Lawrence stepped forward, calm, precise. "This is the Survivors Club," he said softly. "Not a court, not a confessional. We are not here to judge what you did, only what you admit." He looked at each face in turn, then returned his gaze to Alex. "The only currency here is truth, the whole of it, not the part you polish for strangers." Alex felt something collapse inside his chest. He wanted to speak, but the words wouldn't come. What was left to say? Lawrence nodded once. "We vote." He turned toward the others. "You know the question. Is the story complete?" The room was utterly still. Then Raymond, the old man with the glacier stare, raised his hand. "No," he said. The banker raised his hand too. Silent. The woman with the wine glass took a long sip, then lifted her hand slowly. 3. The man with the smile tilted his head. "He told what mattered," he said. "The shape of it, the risk. That's enough for me." His hand stayed down. 3-1. The last woman, silent until now, closed her eyes briefly, then raised her hand. 4. Then all eyes turned to the final man. He stood up. Dark suit, darker eyes. He walked past the circle toward the screen that still hung blank against the wall. Then, without warning, he pulled a small pistol from his jacket and fired. One clean shot. The screen shattered, a spray of glass falling in sharp silence. The sound echoed through the club like a bone snapping underwater. Alex jumped. Lawrence did not. The man holstered the weapon, turned back to the circle, and spoke for the first time that evening. "Sometimes we all lie," he said. "To others, to ourselves, to survive." He walked back to his seat. No one stopped him. Lawrence let a long pause stretch out before breaking the silence. "There is no unanimous verdict," he said quietly. He turned to Alex. "You will not be removed." Alex said nothing. He couldn't. His throat was too tight. "But you will carry this," Lawrence continued. "Not as punishment, as memory." He gestured once. The fire dimmed. The circle remained whole. And Alex, still standing in the center, understood. He hadn't been forgiven. He had simply been seen. The walls were white. Not cold, not sterile, just white, softly lit, windowless, quiet. Alex sat at a simple desk, the kind made not to distract. A chair with no sharp edges, no mirrors, no clocks. Only the sound of his pen moving across paper and the occasional creak of wood when he shifted. The letter had no address. It might never be sent. But he kept writing anyway. "You wanted to hear the truth. You got most of it." He paused, letting the words settle in the silence. His handwriting had grown smaller with each page, more precise, as if control on paper could make up for the chaos in his chest. "I didn't lie because I wanted to protect myself. I lied because I still thought I could win. Even there, even surrounded by people who'd killed, manipulated, stolen with their own hands. I still thought I was smarter, that I could thread the needle, tell just enough to survive. But survival isn't cleverness, not in that room." He stopped and stared at the paper for a long moment. No one had told him what would happen after that night. No accusations, no guards, no trial, just silence. When the screen went black and Stefan's face vanished, Lawrence had simply nodded. And the others? They turned their chairs slightly as if adjusting the weight of what they had heard. No one spoke. No one touched him. No one told him to leave. They just watched. He had walked out alone, not escorted, not dragged, but something had been taken from him, something internal, and it hadn't returned. He never went back to the hotel, never called his lawyers, never checked his accounts. He woke up here, this place wherever here was. The walls too clean to be a prison, too soft to be a clinic, too still to be anything real. Maybe it was a monastery, maybe it was hell, maybe it didn't matter. He resumed writing. I keep wondering why they let me go. If they let me go. Maybe this is just a different part of the club. The quiet room after the noise. The second circle. Sometimes I think about Stefan. Whether he forgave me. Whether he planned all of this. Whether he ever wanted revenge or just the truth. More than anything, I wonder what that room was. Not just a gathering of survivors. That's too neat. He looked up, eyes unfocused. In the far corner of the room, there was a chair. Empty. Always empty. He often imagined Lawrence sitting there, watching, just out of reach. He turned back to the page. Maybe the club didn't want my story. Maybe it wanted my soul. Maybe